Yeah, so thanks for inviting me, Rihanna. And actually, Rihanna is doing her field placement at Options, so it's been great having her there at Options. And so that's kind of how she learned to talk so well. It's like represent people. So I'm just gonna. These are just a few. I just threw a few pictures on here of some of the a variety of people we support. This is Mano down here. Mano is an amazing artist, and he does like to do a lot of his art on clothing, which is really unique and awesome. He does a lot of his art of people. And this is Darwin over here, and Kate, who supports Darwin. Darwin is actually one of the oldest people we support. Darwin is 86 now. And we've been supporting him for it's been about 30 years. He was one of the first people who moved out of one of the state centers, which I'll talk about a little bit more in a second, using a special funding vehicle. But he, because of his physical disabilities and his support needs, he was kind of a pioneer himself in being able to live in the community. And then that's Julie up on the top. And Julie loves gardening, and she's involved in a program called Gardening for Good here in Madison that pairs gardeners who do not have intellectual and other disabilities with gardeners who do. And they meet once a week and work at a garden plot at the community gardens up on in Troy Gardens. I don't know if any of you have heard of Troy Gardens. So that's just a representation of a few of the people we support. But just kind of going back to the beginning, so what is Options? And it is Options in Community Living. We shorten it to Options a lot. And there are other organizations that have Options in their title, so I think sometimes it does get confusing. But Options in Community Living, we've been around since 1981. Options was a pioneer in this idea of community-supported living. Supporting people with developmental disabilities to live in the community in their own homes. And when Options started, and actually Options started in 1975 as a pilot program as part of another organization, and then became Options in 1981. But when Options was piloted in 1975, it was pretty revolutionary to think about people with developmental disabilities living in their own homes in the community. And I'm going to talk about history again in a minute. But so really Options was a pioneer and a pretty innovative pioneer in those early years. Now there's a lot of organizations doing similar work, but back then it was pretty revolutionary. We're committed to assisting people to make and keep their own place in the community. So it's really not just about a place to live, but it's really more than that. It's about being a part of a community and being a community member and having a life that's more than just a place to live. We're funded with public money. There's state money, there's federal money, there's county money. That's all kind of rolled together and administered through Dane County Human Services Department, the Adult Community Services Division. Again, I could spend an hour just talking about funding, so I'm not going to say any more than that. But we have a couple people who are private paying a little bit, but basically our support is provided with public funding. And from the very beginning, the people who started Options, and I wasn't one of the originals. I have been working at Options for 30 years, but there were people there well before me who sort of started things. And really, the people who started Options really felt like they were engaged in social change, and they were, because up until this time, people with disabilities were institutionalized. And so it really was a social movement. It was really about social change and in those early years, and convincing people that this could work and that it was how we should be. It was about social justice and civil rights for people with disabilities. It's about how we should be treating people and supporting people. So who are the folks that are receiving our support? I just showed you pictures of a few people, but people do, we're part of the adult services system, so people do have to be 18 years old to receive our support. People have to be residents of Dane County, because Dane County is paying part of the bill, so they have to be residents of Dane County. And again, people have to have a diagnosis of a developmental disability. And I'll talk a little bit more about what that is for those of you who don't know. I think a lot of you probably do know. And right now we're supporting 111 people. That's gone up a little bit. Most of the time that I've worked at Options, we've supported 100 people. We've kind of stuck at 100. And we've had to kind of creep that up a little bit over the last few years just because it has a lot to do with funding and supporting more people who come with some big budgets to sort of float the boat because there's been a lot of budget cuts and funding issues in the last few years. But I think it is interesting to note that that's a pretty wide range of ages in terms of the people we're supporting. We do sometimes support people right out of high school. We've supported people when they're still in high school. When they're 18, 19, 20 years old, they're still in high school. I think probably most of you are aware that people with developmental disabilities stay in high school until they're 21, that they're eligible for high school for services, educational services until they're 21. And the oldest person we support, Darwin, who you saw a picture of, he's one of the oldest people we support at 86. We support two 86-year-olds right now. Both still very healthy and going strong. And so because of that wide age range and the wide range in disabilities of the people we support, we're providing a wide range of supports. It's not a one-size-fits-all support that we're providing. And again, I'll talk a little bit more about that and how that works. So what is a developmental disability? Do all of you know what it is, or pretty much? A lot of you are shaking your heads, so I won't spend a lot of time on it. So you know that it was defined by law, Chapter 51 of the Wisconsin State Statutes in 1974. And you're also probably all aware of the recent change in the state law from mental retardation to intellectual disability. And the reasons why that happened. I saw something this morning, an email I saw this morning about, there still is, a movement to sort of erase the word, mental retardation from our vocabulary to end the, get rid of the R word. And so I think that was a really wonderful thing that happened here in Wisconsin a few years ago to sort of change it in the law that it's now intellectual disability. But the other developmental disabilities, cerebral palsy, autism, epilepsy, brain injury, and Prader-Willi. We don't support anybody with Prader-Willi anymore. We did at one time. But we support people with all of these other disabilities. And again, and as many of you know, people things often come in pairs or triplets. Often somebody with cerebral palsy will also have an intellectual disability or may also have epilepsy. So there's a variety of people that we're supporting with a variety of different disabilities. We don't spend a whole lot of time talking about people's disabilities at Options. I do an orientation for new staff and I show this slide and I say, this is probably the last time you're going to hear about a person's disability, about their diagnosis. Because that really doesn't, for us, it doesn't really direct what we're doing and how we're supporting somebody, just to know that they have cerebral palsy. We really spend a lot more time talking about who is this person, what are their hopes and dreams, how, what kind of support do they need from us. But everybody's there because they're there. They're getting support because they meet the definition that's been established and meet the county's criteria that it's expected to continue indefinitely and constitutes a substantial handicap, so they're meeting the county's criteria for support services. So I'd like to talk a little bit when I do presentations about the history of services, because I think it's really important to understand where we've been to sort of help us understand where we are and where we're going. And so, we've been in a pretty amazing place in the last, 30 years here in Dane County in our support to people with developmental disabilities, but that wasn't where we started. We started by warehousing people, in the 1850s in the county poorhouses, and then we started building institutions all over the United States and here in Wisconsin as well. We opened our first institution in 1895, the Wisconsin Home for the Feeble-Minded. And I always tell people it's really illustrative to sort of think about where that was built in Chippewa Falls. Do people know where Chippewa Falls is? A lot of you are shaking your heads. In 1895, Chippewa Falls was a pretty isolated place. And that was basically the idea, was to isolate people with disabilities far away from the rest of us because they were kind of scary. We didn't want them to interbreed. We did forced sterilizations. We did really horrible things to people back then. And then, Wisconsin grew as a state, population grew, and then we built a second institution in 1919 in Union Grove. And again, I think the title of this institution says a lot, the Wisconsin Home for the Feeble-Minded, and that says a lot about how we thought about people back then. The name did finally change in 1923 to the Wisconsin Colony and Training School. And when I talk to a lot of the people we support who are in their 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, they talk about when they lived at the colony. And they have really strong memories and experiences, and not all very positive about when they lived in those places. And then in 1953, we built our last institution here in Wisconsin, in Madison. Does anybody know where that is? Do people know where that is? Have you ever visited? The names were, the name of the institutions changed again. I don't know the exact date. I think it was in the 60s, to the State Centers for the Developmentally Disabled. So there was Northern Center, Southern Center, and Central Center. And Central Center is here in Madison on the northern shore of Lake Mendota, right next door to the Mendota Mental Health Institute. And again, let's build the two institutions right next door to each other. That's how we how we thought about people. It's just institutionalize, get people away from the rest of the population, institutionalize them. And so things started to change for people with developmental disabilities in the 1960s. There was just a lot of change socially in this country with the civil rights movement and the women's movement, and there was just a lot of different thinking about groups of people. And the Kennedy administration, President Kennedy had a sister Rose who had a developmental disability, and she actually lived here in Wisconsin in a private institution called St. Coletta's. So that the Kennedy family was really involved in Special Olympics, and so there started to be this different awareness about people, and then family members started to get together and talk to each other and advocate, and organizations like the Association for Retarded Citizens grew out of that family involvement and advocacy. And so then in the 1970s, there was just a lot of sweeping policy change and laws. So that's when public law that I was just mentioned, the Chapter 51 of the Wisconsin State Statutes in 1975. So that was when just a lot of changes happened for people with developmental disabilities. And so up until the 70s, it really was the sort of institutions were the game. And that's where, families were encouraged to put their kids in the institution. And then, so in the 1970s, there started to be some other options. There were group homes, and there were places called ICFMRs, which were intermediate care facilities for the mentally retarded. So there were some other options, and it was one of those places that decided to experiment with an apartment program that started options. And so then, into the 1980s and beyond, up until today, there's just been, this a lot of deinstitutionalization then. All those people we institutionalized, all those other, up until the 80s, then we started to take them out of the institutions and help support them in community-based residential settings. And so that's sort of where options came in then in the late 70s and 80s and started taking on a lot of those people who were being deinstitutionalized. And there were programs like the KIP programs. Have people heard of the KIP program, the Community Integration Program? That started in the 80s where money was diverted. So medical assistance money that was paying for people to be in the institution was then diverted into community settings. So that MA money, that public funding could follow people into the community. And so that's where a lot of the money that's supporting options is coming from. So what is options about? And I think the simplest, statement is we're about helping people live good lives. We try to help people describe in their own words as much as possible what they want their life to be, what they want their life to look like, what are their hopes, what are their dreams, and how can we find ways to help them realize those, just as any of us would want that same thing for ourselves, right? So, really since the very beginning, the people who started options wanted to sort of be very values-based in what they were doing. And there was no guidebook, there was no sort of how-to manual, there was no government regulation or oversight about how we were doing it. And so the people who started Options really decided they needed to have some kind of guidepost for what they were doing. So they came up with these vision, mission, and value statements. And we do still sort of pull them out every once in a while and sort of, is this still our compass? Is this still right? And I think for the most part it is. I mean, this really hasn't changed in 35 years. And so our vision is that we believe every person has a right to live in a home in the community and be an accepted part of that community. And I think you could sort of describe that as a vision for any human being, basically. And then our mission then, very simply, is to make that happen. It's to provide the support and coordinate services for people so that they can live in their own homes. And then we assist them, to make their own choices and establish their own goals. And I think the other part of this is really important our support is available to people for the extent that they want it and for as long as they want it. And over the last 35 years, that's really been tested because many of those people that we started supporting 35 years ago, we're still supporting, but they're not the same. I'm not the same as I was 35 years ago. A lot of you obviously weren't born 35 years ago, but you'll see that you change a lot in your adult life. And those people who were young adults are now getting older and their needs are changing. They're getting cancer, they're getting diabetes, and they're having parts of their bodies amputated, and they're having major changes in their lives. And they maybe 35 years ago were pretty independent. And could get around town pretty independently and just needed a little bit of support. And now they might need support 24 hours a day because their needs have changed so significantly and it's not safe for them to be alone. And they just have so many medical support needs that they can't be alone. So we've been challenged on that and we've been tested on that. And a huge part of that test is a financial test because obviously if you need 24 hours of support, you're going to be a lot more expensive to support that way than you were 20 years ago when you were pretty independent. And so that's been a huge challenge for the support system in general, in Dane County. And so again, our values haven't changed. Our values are still to help people with developmental disabilities, their families, and the larger community, accept each other and learn from each other and develop, mutual understanding. And that we want each person to sort of be as fulfilled as possible in their hopes and their dreams. So those things, clearly haven't changed and still guide the work that we do, even though in a lot of ways it's gotten a lot harder. So I think, one of the really important things at Options is just trying to sort of build a strong foundation for people and then sort of going from there. And, that strong foundation is really figuring out what does this person need? And what a person needs is really very individualized and based on who that person is. But it can include things like personal care. So if you have a physical disability, if you have cerebral palsy and you use a wheelchair like Darwin, who I showed you in the beginning, you're going to need lots of personal care assistance. You're going to need somebody to be there every day to get you out of bed every morning and help you take a shower, maybe help you eat. There's just going to be a lot of just those personal care needs, personal care tasks. For a lot of people, it's helping with just basic daily living things that we all do. Go to the grocery store, cook, clean, shop. Some people we support are very involved in that for themselves, and other people can't help at all, so they need total assistance with those things. There's a lot of stuff around money, helping people manage their money and pay their bills, and it's a little bit more complicated than that because there are other systems in Dane County, the way things happen, but we do still have a lot of, just involvement in people's day-to-day money and making sure that they've got money the money that they need for their daily activities. Big thing, housing assistance. So people need a place to live. And we help people rent their own places to live. Options doesn't own property. Options is, we try not to be on the lease. It's the person we support, it's their home. Sometimes we're forced to sort of co-sign leases and, get involved in that way. But we prefer that the person we support be on the lease, that it be their own home. There are a few people we support who actually own their home, or their family owns or partially owns the home that they live in. But for the most part, people are renting. People are renting apartments. Occasionally, people are renting single-family homes where we have, people living together. Some people we support live alone. Some people we support live with roommates. The most we have is 3 people living together, 3 roommates living together and sharing support. There's been in the last 10 years or so, there's been a lot more pressure to have people live together. And again, that has to do with, money. It's cheaper. Our largest cost is our staff time, paying staff. And so if a staff person can support 2 or 3 people at a time as opposed to one-on-one staffing, that's going to be more cost effective. So there's been a lot of pressure to sort of reduce costs and have people live together. A huge part of our support to people is the medical support. A lot of people we support have pretty intensive medical support needs. And as I said, those are changing. Those are getting more intense. More people are just having greater medical needs. So a lot of our staff spend a lot of time at doctor's appointments and following up after doctor's appointments, making sure staff understand what the support needs are around the medical needs. And then, addressing safety, addressing emergency needs, mobility needs. We provide transportation for some of the people we support. A lot of people we support I think most of you have probably seen the Metro Plus buses going around town. So we're really fortunate here in Madison to have that specialized transportation for people who use wheelchairs and need that accessible transportation. And even the mainline buses now are more accessible certainly than they were 20 years ago, which is awesome. So there are just sort of a lot of the things that we're doing for people so that they can have that good life and sort of have that foundation, because you can't have a good life in the community and go out and do other things unless you have that foundation at home. And so that's what we're trying to do, is sort of provide that foundation for people at home. And so really the only way that we've figured out how to do that and do it well and do it successfully is really one person at a time, and really getting to know who the person is and then building the support around them. So it's not just, we have an opening in XYZ house and we're going to plug you in there. It's starting with you and sort of who are you? What makes you tick? Who are you? And also, another really, really important question is, who else in the world knows and loves this person? Because those people need to be part of the support. They need to be part of the planning. They need to be part of helping us figure out who is this person. And then, what is the person telling us about what they want and what they need? Because that's not always the same as what we think it is. It's not always the same as what mom might think it is, or guardian might think it is. And sometimes that can be really challenging, because people can't always tell us with words what they want and what they need. And so sometimes we have to pay attention in other ways, and sometimes it takes a really long time. Just a really brief story, we supported a woman named Chris who recently passed away, and we supported her for nearly 30 years, and it took us a really long time to figure it out. And we had to make a lot of mistakes with her. She moved, we met her, she moved her out of an institution, set her up in an apartment. We thought we knew what we were doing. 3 months later, she had to move because things were bad. It wasn't going well. And then we put her in a different apartment, and kind of changed things a little bit, and we thought we had it figured out. A few months later, she had to move again. And so we went through this process of, moving and moving and moving until, and a lot of people were like, thinking, well, Chris just needs to change what she's doing, and, we need to change Chris. And, that really wasn't what needed to happen, is we needed to change how we were supporting Chris. And it took us, unfortunately took us a little kind of too long to sort of figure that out. And she needed to live in a different kind of housing situation, and she needed a different staff support, and she needed time. She needed time to just adjust to years living in the community after living for 30 years in institutional settings. And those institutional settings have really done some pretty horrible things to people, and it sort of shaped who they are. And it's sort of really, it takes people time to sort of unlearn that and figure out how to live in the community sometimes. And then what more is possible? It's one thing to sort of set people up in the community and they're living in an apartment, but they can still be pretty isolated and not have a life. So it's more than just having a place to live, it's having a life. And so that question of what more is possible for this person is a really important one. And it's one that sometimes, frankly, can get lost because you can get so bogged down in the sort of day-to-day. Is there somebody to get this person up in the morning and get dressed and get fed, and are there groceries, and just those really basic things that have to happen for all of us and for all of the people we support. Sometimes that what more is possible can be really hard to come back to because you can just get so bogged down in just the basic support. But it's a really important question to keep coming back to. And just sort of keeping those questions alive so that people have opportunities to grow and develop. And I showed you that picture of Mano in the beginning and his art. And we could, people could just sort of ignore the fact that Mano is an artist and just sort of focus on, well, he's got a place to live. What else does he need, right? But he hasn't fulfilled his potential and had an opportunity to grow and contribute if we don't focus on his art and help him have a chance to sell it and show it and truly be an artist. And there are several people we support where that's become a huge part of our support is helping them realize their artistic potential because it's really there and it's who they are. But there's also that just that basic stuff that has to happen too. So just real briefly, I just show you this. I mean, so from from pretty early on, we sort of came up with these quality of life areas that have kind of really directed a lot of what we do, and I think they're really important. It's a really important framework for our work, and so I just wanted to throw them out there. And we've kind of asked ourselves, when we're looking at a person's life and we're doing planning, and I haven't even talked about planning, I think another really important part of supporting people and supporting them well is to sort of continually be planning and readjusting the plan and really, asking ourselves in all of these areas, how are we doing for this person? Do they have choice in their lives? Are they autonomous as possible? What is their income? Do they have enough income? Have we tapped into all the resources that we know of to help them financially? And there have been some pretty amazing resources that we've been able to tap into, like Section 8 housing vouchers. Not sure if people are aware of that program, it's a federal program. Again, in the 80s and 90s, there was a lot of money. There was a lot of Section 8 money and a lot of availability to sort of use that as a resource for people. The people we support have low incomes. They're living on Social Security and SSI. But if we could tap into a Section 8 rent voucher for them, then they only have to pay a third of their money for rent, and they can live in some pretty nice places. So we got every person we possibly could on the Section 8 program when it was possible. Well, that's again another source of money that's kind of dried up, and it's really, the waiting list is always closed. Occasionally they sort of open up the waiting list, and you can do this kind of lottery thing to try to get back on the waiting list. But it's a resource that's pretty much gone away for us, is Section 8 rent vouchers for new people. I mean, a lot of the people we supported for years still have them, but unfortunately that's kind of dried up. Housing. Is this person living in the best possible place that they can be? Do they like their roommates? Or if they have a roommate, do they like the roommate, or do they want to move? Are they happy living where they're living? Moving is really hard, and packing everything up and moving to a new place. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work for options staff, and it's not that we don't want people to move all the time, but it's not up to us. It's really up to the people we support. And if somebody really wants to move, then we'll do our best to make it happen for them, because again, we want them to be in the right housing situation for them, and in the right place, in the right neighborhood, in the right place that makes sense for them. Physical mental health. Are we paying attention to the person's health? Is there something that we're missing? Do they like their doctor? Are they getting good medical care? Do we need to make a change? Is this not the right thing for them? And mental health as well. Are they getting the best mental health services? Again, a real challenge in our community and with funding to get good mental health services. Meaningful activities. Looks like I missed the space there. Meaningful activities. Does the person have something to do with their time? Do they have meaningful things to do during the day? Do they have a job if they want a job? Do they get out and do fun things in the community? Are they involved with other people in the community? Appearance hygiene. Are we helping the person pay attention to that? Again, appearance and hygiene matters, and if people aren't paying attention to that, then it's going to be hard to be involved in the community and have people want to spend time with you. And sometimes it can be a really hard thing, because sometimes people have complicated histories where they might not like to shower very often. If you grew up in an institution and every time you took a shower was with a bunch of other people, or you took a shower in where there was no privacy, or you were sexually abused in a shower, you're not going to really want to pay attention to your appearance and hygiene, because there's other stuff behind that. And so sometimes we have to delve really deeply into that with people to help them in that area, and it can be really kind of hard sometimes. Safety. Is the person safe in their environments that they spend time in? Have they been trained to respond in a safe way to dangerous situations? Do they know how to answer the door? Do they know how to respond to a fire? Do they know how to cross the street safely? There's a lot of safety issues for people that we need to think about and pay attention to. Relating with others. Does this person have other people in their life that cares about them? And do they see them? We've spent a lot of time over the years helping people reconnect with family and reconnect with people and work on those relationships. Because again, if you've been institutionalized and you've been in an institution for 30 years, you've probably lost contact with a lot of family. So we've put a lot of effort over the years into sort of helping people reconnect. And then helping people meet new people and form new relationships and new connections. And mobility. Many people we support use wheelchairs or other mobility devices. So it's sort of making sure that they have the best, that's working for them and that they've got what they need in terms of mobility. And then service provider issues. Are they happy with us? Do they like the support they're getting from Options? Do they like the support that they're getting from other providers that they might have in their life? And if not, what can we do to change it? How can we make it better? So these are sort of just the areas and the questions we sort of continually need to be sort of asking ourselves and planning around to sort of help people have the best life possible. And then just real briefly, so how are we structuring that support? And really what we've tried to do is use a team approach. We have two positions at Options. We have community support workers who, it's not really a case management position, but that's sort of sometimes how it's been framed. As community support workers have very small caseloads, generally not too much bigger than 5 or 6, because they go very deeply into the lives of the people we support. And then we have home support worker position. Oops, I missed an E on the end of provide. The home support workers are direct support workers. So they're the people who are doing those personal care tasks and helping people maintain their home, and so they work directly with people in their homes and in the community, and they're supervised by the community support workers. And just sort of organizationally then, we organize those community support workers onto 5 teams, so that each team has a group of people supported by Options that team gets to know really, really well. And so then there's backup on the team between the community support workers and supervising then the direct home support workers. So that's just to give you a brief sense of how that works. And then I just wanted to talk real briefly about sort of, we talked a little bit about the past and where we are in the present, and I just sort of wanted to talk real briefly about the bigger picture and sort of the future for people, for Options as an organization and for people supported in Dane County with developmental disabilities. You know, right now in Dane County, the Dane County Human Services Adult Community Services Division oversees Options and the other agencies like Options in Dane County. And there's a whole network in Dane County that's been developed over the last 35 years. And it's been a pretty amazing network of support to people in this county with developmental disabilities. There's many organizations like Options that are providing residential support. And then there's other organizations that are doing vocational support to people and other sort of day support kind of things. And so there's this large provider network of people in Dane County that are providing the support. And many of them, like Options, have been leaders in what they're doing. And in Wisconsin, Dane County has been kind of a best practices kind of model for not only Wisconsin, but for the country. In Options early years, when Options was so uniquely doing what we were doing, we would have visitors from all over the United States. We'd have visitors from overseas who would come and sort of talk to us about what we were doing because people wanted to replicate it. And it has been replicated. Again, many other organizations in Madison are now doing similar work and around the country. But over the last maybe it's my memory fails me sometimes, but it's been at least 10 years that the state of Wisconsin has been kind of in this paradigm shift from, and maybe you guys have probably been talking about this in your field units possibly, but we've been this sort of paradigm shift from county-based services. So up until then, every county was responsible for developing its own system for support. And so then, there were very much pros and cons to that. The largest con being that there were often really long waiting lists for support. And that's currently the case in Dane County. Dane County has a long waiting list for people who want Option support or who want support from an organization like Options, residential support. And there's not money and there's not the resources to provide that support to everyone. It's a limited resource. And so the state of Wisconsin developed something called family care. Has everybody heard about family care? Yeah, so the state of Wisconsin came up with this idea, which I think is actually a really good idea in its purest form. Let's support everybody. Let's eliminate waiting lists. Like, how can you argue with that, right? Like, everybody is entitled to services. Everybody should get something. And so the state has been involved in this shift to family care. And family care has been rolled out and is currently happening in a lot of counties in Wisconsin. Again, I didn't look up the number, but it's most of the counties in Wisconsin. There aren't very many left that are not part of family care, but Dane County is one of them that is left, that is not part of family care. And Dane County actually has been pretty resistant to the idea of family care because the idea of family care is let's pool all the money. Let's pool all the money for everybody who needs support and then we'll kind of divvy it out. So, Dane County has always put in a lot of local money, local Dane County money, into the human service system here in Dane County. So Dane County has been kind of reluctant to sort of put their money in the big pot and has been really resistant to family care. Well, that's going to end because Family Care 2.0, so the new version of Family Care is coming out, and all of the counties in Wisconsin are going to be part of Family Care 2.0. And so we're again, the idea behind family care is a noble one, and there's no argument with it. We're just really concerned, though, about how it's going to impact us as an organization and how it's going to impact the system that already exists here in Dane County, and how, and more specifically, how it's going to impact the people we support and the funding, because again, it's going to be a statewide system in which managed care organizations, kind of manage the money, and those managed care organizations are going to be most likely large insurance companies. And large insurance companies, often, what's most important to them is the bottom line. And what's most important to us is the quality of the support that we're providing and the lives of the people we support. And we're a little nervous about how those value systems are going to intersect and how it's going to play out for the people we support. And for all of Dane County, for all of the services that are being supported here. So that's kind of the bigger picture, and sort of, so it's, where we go in the future is kind of a big question mark, and how that's going to end up. But I think that for a lot of people it's going to be good, because with the current family care system, a lot of people in Wisconsin are getting services that did not get services before, and so that's a really good thing, and that's what we're kind of holding on to. So. And I think that was my last slide. Yeah. So yeah, that's, any questions or comments? Yeah.
So myself and my coworker Helen are here from the road home. We provide case management and housing services to families experiencing homelessness. And I think where we've recently seen a really large gap, and where people are losing housing, is adults with children who have developmental or cognitive disabilities.
Interesting.
And I don't think we're doing a great job of specializing our services to those families. And so I'm wondering if you have ideas on resources for, like, usually we're seeing, I would say, single mothers with kids who have, and it's probably less severe developmental disabilities than who is typically served by the DD system. But do you have ideas on resources or places we could partner to get someone with specialization in, while we do our, like, housing and holistic and family case management, to have someone else with that kind of experience of what you do would be phenomenal.
Well, any child that has a developmental disability should be getting services in the school system.
It's the adult, so the head of household.
Oh, the head of, okay.
The head of household, yeah, has cognitive disability.
The head of household
and
is,
a child in their care.
and they have a child in their care.
So it's, but do you have any advice on how to access? I feel like most of the services I see are for single adults, and I don't know if there are services in our community for.
Well, again, I guess the threshold for getting services. I mean, even if the person has a child, if they have a developmental disability and they meet the threshold for the county to get services, they can get services. So it might be, at least making the county aware of this person, and that they might need services. So it's the adult community services. They have an intake. I don't have that number with me, but there is an intake person, at Dane County Human Services and the Adult Community Services Division. They do intake. This happens to us all the time. It's like we get phone calls from, people, I have a son, with a developmental disability, can you support him? And the first thing we say to them is, you have to call. First, you need to be deemed eligible for services by the county, and then the county needs to, make that money available to get your services. So you can't even talk to us first. You have to go to the county first. So that would be a place I would say to start. Okay. So that the county knows about this person, and that they, is this person eligible for services? And maybe they are. We've supported women who have children. Okay. Adult women who have children.
That's great.
Yeah.
So that's where we're seeing a huge.
I was actually a birth coach for one of them who had a child. So it's like, they're not ineligible for services necessarily. It just depends on
that, and then you, instead of our,
right. It depends on what their diagnosis is and what the degree of their disability, and so yeah, you need to start with the county.
And typically, so we'll try to help the individual get like a neuropsych eval and get that information compiled. We could say we're doing an SSI application. We get all that through. If it's a family starting or an individual starting from kind of scratch there, does the county do some of that assessment piece? Or do you have to come in with like neuropsych?
Not necessarily, because if they're going to want to know, yeah, because if it looks like this person might be eligible for services, they're going to do their assessment, and then there would, yeah. So yeah, I guess that's my main piece of advice is to make sure that the county's aware of who this person is. And then if they're, they might have some other ideas for you too, if they say, well, this person isn't really eligible for services, but there might be some other things. But yeah. Paying attention to, again, Section 8, I mean, the voucher, again, we did get somebody a couple years ago they did open up the waiting list. So occasionally they open up the waiting list. So you just kind of need to be checking that out, which maybe you guys probably already are. Yeah, because again, that's what these people need. That's what these single moms need. They need housing assistance, really.
Do you find that your agency is partnering with landlords? Like, do you have difficult finding apartments or apartments that people want for your clients?
We have some landlords that we work with. We have people living all over Madison, all different kinds of housing, all different kinds of landlords. I mean, it just really depends. I mean, some people we support, one of their support need might be some modified housing. So we have a couple landlords that we've worked with who have been really willing to let us make major changes to their property, to sort of modify. And they'll do it because it's a long-term lease then. Because if we make some major modifications to an apartment or a duplex or whatever, it's because we think that this is that somebody's going to live there for a long time. And a lot of times landlords you can make those changes as long as you undo it when this person leaves. So sometimes we'll just sort of make those kind of agreements with landlords. So yeah, I mean, we've been around for so long that landlords know about us, and a lot of landlords like us because again, it's a long-term commitment on the part of the leaseholder. And then, and sometimes we do co-sign leases, so it's kind of a guarantee for the landlord too. So, yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Sorry, I can be more helpful. Hi.
Could you speak a little bit more on the family care 2.0?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't quite get, what's the difference, between their kind of support and the kind of support that, Dane County currently is doing now.
I think the main difference, the thing we're concerned about, is flexibility. Because historically with Dane County, we're contracting directly with Dane County. Each person we support has a budget that's established by the county, and then we have a contract with the county to get that money to support this person. And so Dane County sort of had, the managers at the county level sort of have their fingers directly on the purse strings, and so if somebody's need changes dramatically, let's say tomorrow, I'm supporting Dan, and tomorrow he has a stroke. He goes into the hospital, he goes through rehab, suddenly, he used to need 5 hours a week of support, now to get him back out of the nursing home, he needs 24-hour support. We go back to the county and we say, here's Dan, you've been supporting him for 30 years, his needs have changed, now we need more money to support him. And you make the case, and the county pretty readily says, yes, okay, here's some more money to support Dan because we're committed to him, we've been supporting him for 30 years. Now, with family care, we're going to have to go to the insurance company to ask for this money for Dan. And just given what's happening with family care right now, a lot of providers have had a lot of trouble with that, and they've had trouble with just sudden cuts, that don't really make sense. Why are you cutting the budget all of a sudden? So it's managed care. So it's really different in how things work. And so the way we've been able to so successfully support the people, I think the key word is flexibility. We've just been able to change things really quickly when people change, and we're really worried about that's getting those changes to happen really quickly, and having that flexibility is just really a concern. And that's what we're hearing from other people around the state with the current family care system, is that it's not real flexible. And sometimes things happen in these just kind of random ways. Did you have something to add to that?
Yes. I worked in the county system for a number of years, and worked pretty closely during the 80s and 90s with a lot of the development of this. And one of the wonderful things, and you touched on it with advocacy, is that in this county we've been very rich both in resources and in the personal interaction between the policymakers at the county level, county board, county committees,
Managers.
Department of Human Service
Yeah.
managers. A lot of real personal people knowing each other and working on behalf of people.
Yeah.
County board hearings often have many, many persons with developmental disabilities who
And it
come.
really went back to shared values. It was about this sort of like, we're doing something really unique here, and it's about those, they shared our values. And I'm not so sure the insurance companies are going to share our values. I mean,
So that's an edge we lose. Yeah, that's-
So when you call it family care, are they being supported by the families?
Family care, I'm not sure that was the best title for the program, because what family care is, it's long-term support. It's long-term support. It's a long-term care support system in Wisconsin for people who are elderly, for people who have physical disabilities, and for people who have developmental disabilities. And they called it family care. So I think it's kind of a misnomer. It's confusing. So why are you calling it family care? Because it really has nothing to do with families.
So they use agencies like yours too?
What's
The
that?
state uses agencies like yours?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Right.
So how
So-
do you interface with Care Wisconsin, which Indian County currently is partnership,
Mm-hmm.
right? So is that the insurance managed care you're talking about?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's with Family Care 2.0, like the state it actually is going to be. So in the current family care system, there are things called MCOs, managed care organizations. And those MCOs right now don't have to be actual insurance companies, but when the law was changed, for Family Care 2.0, the MCOs have to actually be insurance companies. And so the current MCOs, a lot of those may not be able to still operate under Family Care 2.0. I think that's still kind of up in the air how that's going to all kind of work out. But there are, so there are a lot of big insurance companies that are looking at coming into Wisconsin and applying to be those MCOs, to be the managed care organizations. Yeah, and I'm going to a meeting on Thursday that's where a lot of those insurance company representatives are coming to a meeting at the convention center to sort of meet with community providers to get some education. So we have this opportunity to educate the insurance companies about how great things are in Dane County and help them understand. But there's a bunch of them looking at doing business in Wisconsin under Family Care 2.0. So that's the big concern, is just, do they share our values, and are they going to be flexible, and is it going to be as good as it's been? And it's not that it hasn't been hard. The current county system, our agency has had a budget cut every year except this year for like the last 10 years. So it's not that the counties have been just like, hasn't been an open checkbook to get here, take everything you want. I mean, they've been cutting our budgets, and we've had to adjust, and we've had to make changes and deal with that. But it's been in the spirit of, let's work together, again, to sort of to shared values, and let's kind of figure out how this is going to work. But we don't know these big insurance companies and their executives and how they're going to proceed. So, yeah.
Do you see even more crisis in finding housing as our population ages, competing with the same housing kind of that your population is competing for?
Absolutely. I mean, housing has been an issue for us, particularly accessible housing. Somebody uses a wheelchair and needs, accessible housing. It's really hard to find accessible, affordable housing. And for that reason, actually, we have there's an apartment building on the east side where we have a number of people we support living in the same apartment building, which we don't like, because we want people to interact with, the community. We don't want everybody we support to live in the same building and then it looks like, a nursing home or something. But we have a number of households people living in the same building for that reason, because it was accessible and it was affordable. So it's a need. It's a great need in our communities to have that housing. Affordable housing in general is, where isn't it a need? Yeah.
The agency called the Tenant Resource Center also has they have a list of user-friendly landlords. Who are the people you can work with, and that's across all disabilities or different service areas. So
that can be a really good resource.
So one more question, please. Like you said, to support these people, to give them, the quality services that they desire, we need to have people that know them. You listed some of those, some things like you listed, people that know them and love them. And most of them, like you said also, being that they've been in the residential groups, for some time, they've lost families. And so who are the most likely people that can give us information about these people with regards, what they really want, and what they desire, to be well supported?
Yeah, and that's a great question. And, I think first, there's these kind of two groups at Options. There's kind of the group that we've been supporting for a really long time, and they're getting older, and their family members have passed away often, their parents, and that's a harder question to answer for them because many times they don't have somebody. And one thing I did not talk about, and again, we just have a couple more minutes, but sometimes for us, for those people, it's like we have a staff position called the community builder. And so one of, another really important part of our work is trying to find those people, help people develop relationships. And because everybody is safer if they have non-paid staff in their lives, right? Because those people can, they're extra eyes, they can ask questions, it's just safer for everybody, and everybody has a better life if not everybody you interact with is paid to be with you, right? So we have spent a lot of time over the years, looking at the people we support who are the most vulnerable, the people who don't have anybody who knows them, who cares about them, who loves them, that isn't paid. And then for those people, really prioritizing them for community building and helping develop circles of support around those folks, or finding volunteers in the community to come in and do things with them and get to know them. And sometimes a volunteer turns into a long-term friend. So we have this whole other community building work that we do to sort of help people become less isolated. And if they're less isolated, they're safer, and then they have people that we can talk to about, well, what have you discovered about Robin? What do you know that makes her tick, and what have you learned? And then we have this other group of people who are younger, because the people we've been taking on, as I said, in the last 5-6 years, we've been taking on some new people, because new people often come with money, that can help the agency. And most of those newer people that we're supporting are people who are younger. Often they're 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. They often have an autism diagnosis. They often have still very involved family members, because they probably grew up in their family home, and then things came to a crisis point for some reason, and then they ended up going to Mendota or Central Wisconsin Center or someplace like that because there was a crisis, and then the county wants to get them out of those places because they cost the county a lot of money, and then they end up getting into the service system. So really right now, the best way to get into the service system, because of the backup, because of the waiting list, is to have a crisis, an expensive crisis. Because if you have an expensive crisis, then the county, is going to want to figure out a cheaper way to pay for that. They don't want to pay for you to be at Central Center or at Winnebago or Mendota. Yeah. I'm sorry. Did I finish? Did I really answer your question?
I'm trying to get at something. Because I thought from what you said, you have these two categories of people. I've forgotten what you call one, like the coordinators, and then we have the direct support.
Right, we have home support worker staff, the direct support staff.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I thought those, should have been the best people that, since they are the ones that directly support these guys, and some of them work with them,
Oh yeah, we absolutely include them in that. I mean, we absolutely ask them and include them in planning and include them, but they're paid staff. But we also like to figure out who else can we talk to, who else can we include in this person's life that isn't paid to be with them. And paid staff don't always last a long time, right? I think we all know in the human services system, there can be pretty rapid turnover. That's not to say, we have one direct support staff person who's worked for us for 30 years. Darwin, who I showed you in the wheelchair in the beginning, he has a support worker named Randy who's worked with him for 30 years. they're like brothers. Like it just, yeah. I mean, so it happens. There's sometimes people just sort of commit to it and it becomes their life work, and they just become so, they're just so committed to the people that they're supporting that they never leave. But it's more likely that, staff person will be around for 6 months or 9 months, a year if we're lucky. And then there's a new staff, and then you kind of start over, getting to know the person. And, so because of that turnover and because of staff, it's also nice when people we support have somebody else in their life who isn't going to go away, a family member, a sister, a guardian, just a friend who's just committed to sort of sticking with that person. So that's what we think is really important to try to help people find in their lives, is those, yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Julie.
You're welcome.
Do you have a couple minutes to stay around for any remaining questions?
Yeah. I have a couple minutes. Yes. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Thank you.